You're watching Cold Blood Empire original story. They told Aviana Scott she was unfinished, that the moon had passed her by when she was born, looked down at her tiny body, and decided she wasn't worth the gift. That something essential, something every wolf in the territory carried like breath itself, had been forgotten, skipped over, denied. In a world ruled by fangs and fury, by bloodlines traced back centuries and strength measured in shifted form, being wolfless wasn't just rare. It was unforgivable. It was proof of failure. It was a shame that you lived and breathed and sat at your mother's table every single night. Aviana learned early that love was conditional, that her mother, Melissa Scott, didn't touch her with tenderness. She beat her like a mistake that refused to correct itself. Like a flaw that should have been driven out years ago but persisted stubbornly in a body that deserved better. Every strike was a reminder. Every rough hand against her skin carried the silent accusation. You were supposed to be more than this. The other children in the pack shifted by 12, some earlier. Their eyes would glow amber or silver, their bones would crack and reshape, and their parents would weep with pride. Aviana turned 12, and nothing happened. 13 came, then 14, then 15. Nothing. Her mother stopped inviting people over, stopped mentioning her daughter in conversations, stopped looking her in the eye unless it was to correct her posture, her tone, her existence. Aviana learned to make herself small, to speak only when spoken to apologize for things she hadn't done, just in case. She learned that silence hurt less than hope, that obedience was safer than questions. Those dreams were for people who had wolves. The pack didn't bully her, they didn't need to. Bullying required acknowledgement. Instead, they looked through her, spoke around her, laughed at jokes she wasn't part of, and made plans she'd never be included in. When pack gatherings happened under the full moon, Aviana stayed inside. When the howls rose through the forest like songs her body would never sing, she covered her ears and pretended it didn't hurt. But it did. Every single time. Her mother never said she loved her, never said she was proud, never said anything that didn't come with a correction attached. Stand straighter, Aviana. You already lack a wolf, don't lack dignity either. Speak softer. Loud voices belong to those who have something to say. Don't waste food. It's more than you've earned. Aviana believed her. I believed every word. Believed she was a mistake her mother had been forced to keep. And then one night when Aviana was 17 and had long stopped expecting anything to change, a man came to their door. He didn't knock loudly, didn't demand entry, didn't raise his voice or throw his weight around the way alphas usually did. He simply stood there, tall and still. His presence filling the doorway like winter itself had taken shape. Melissa opened the door, and for the first time in Aviana's life, she saw her mother go pale. The man's eyes swept the room once calm, cold, assessing, and landed on Aviana. She froze. She didn't know who he was, didn't know why her mother had gone so quiet, why her hands were trembling, why she suddenly looked small. The man didn't explain himself, didn't introduce himself. He only looked at Aviana and asked one question. Do you want to stay? 4 words that would burn down everything Aviana thought she knew about power, love, and the girl she believed herself to be. Because the man standing in that doorway wasn't just any alpha. And Aviana Scott, wolfless, invisible, unwanted, wasn't as weak as they all believed. This is the story of what happens when the girl they erased becomes the woman they can't control. When the alpha who never needed to prove his strength meets the girl who never knew she had any. When silence stops meaning fear, and when being chosen feels more dangerous than being forgotten. Hey, quick question. How are you feeling right now? Thank you so much for being here. It truly means the world to me. I'm building Cold Blood Empire toward 10,000 subscribers, and if Aviana's story is already pulling at your heart, please hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. Alright, now let's begin. Chapter 1. Aviana had been awake for an hour before her mother came in. She always woke early. It was safer that way. If she was already dressed, already quiet, already useful, there was less to criticize. The door opened without a knock. Melissa Scott entered, carrying nothing but the same cold anger she wore every morning. Come here. Aviana stood from the edge of her bed and walked forward, hands folded in front of her, eyes down. She knew what was coming. Her mother's hand struck her face before she could brace for it. The sting bloomed across her cheek, sharp and familiar. You're 17 now, Melissa said quietly. And still nothing. Aviana said nothing. The Velasquez girl shifted last week. She's 14. Aviana's throat tightened, but she kept her face blank. Even Bailey Hunter's son showed signs at 10. 10, Aviana. Another strike, this time to her shoulder. I don't know what I did to deserve this, Melissa continued, voice low and bitter. I followed every tradition, every ritual. I prayed under every moon, Aviana wanted to say. Maybe it's not about you, but she didn't. She never did. Melissa stepped back, studying her daughter like a sculpture that had come out wrong. You'll go to the market today. Get vegetables. Don't speak to anyone unless they speak first. And don't, she paused, eyes hard. Don't embarrass me. Yes, ma'am. Melissa left without another word. Aviana exhaled slowly, her hands shaking just a little. She touched her face where the mark would bloom into a bruise by evening. She dressed in the plain, worn dress her mother had set out for her and braided her hair tightly. The market was always the worst. People didn't say anything directly, but she felt their eyes, felt their pity, their judgment, their relief that their own children weren't like her. The market was held every week in the center of the territory, a sprawling clearing surrounded by tall pines. Stalls lined the edges, selling meat, herbs, tools, cloth. Aviana kept her head down as she moved between them, picking up what her mother had written on the list. Carrots, potatoes, salt. She was reaching for a bundle of greens when she heard the laughter. Look, it's the Scott girl. Aviana's stomach sank. She didn't turn around. Still no wolf, huh? The voice belonged to Celia Barron, a girl her age whose wolf had come in strong and silver at 13. That's gotta be some kind of record. Her friends giggled. Aviana handed the vendor her coins, took the vegetables, and turned to leave. Where are you going? Celia stepped into her path, arms crossed. We're just talking. I have to get home. Why? Your mama's gonna beat you again? More laughter. I heard she hits you every morning like it'll knock the wolf into you. Is that true? Aviana's fingers tightened around the basket. It's true, isn't it? Celia leaned in, eyes gleaming. She's ashamed of you. Move, please. Or what? Celia's smile widened. You gonna shift and make me? The laughter was louder now, drawing attention. Aviana felt her face burn. She stepped around Celia and walked quickly toward the edge of the market, her heart pounding, her vision blurring. She didn't cry. She never cried in public, but her chest ached, and her throat felt thick, and by the time she reached the tree line, her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the basket. She stopped, leaning against a tree, trying to breathe. You already lack a wolf, don't lack dignity too. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Aviana straightened, wiped her eyes quickly, and started walking home. She didn't see the man watching her from the shadows, didn't notice the way his pale eyes followed her all the way to the edge of the forest, didn't know that Bjorn Hammond, Alpha King of the Northern Territory, had been standing in that market for one reason only, to see if the rumors were true. They were. That night, Melissa was angrier than usual. You took too long. I'm sorry. And you bought the wrong carrots. I said the large ones. I'm sorry. Her mother's hand struck her again. Harder this time. Stop apologizing and do better. Aviana set the table in silence, placed the food, and sat only after her mother had taken her first bite. They ate without speaking. It was always like this. Quiet, cold, functional. Aviana had just started clearing the plates when there was a knock at the door. Melissa frowned. They never had visitors. She stood, smoothed her dress, and opened the door. Aviana heard her mother's breath catch. Alpha Hammond. Aviana's hands froze over the basin. Alpha Hammond. Everyone knew that name. The King of the North. A man who ruled the largest, wealthiest territory on the continent. A man whose wolf was said to be massive, white as snow, and utterly silent before the kill. A man no one saw unless he wanted to be seen. Mrs. Scott. His voice was low, calm, and carried the kind of weight that didn't need volume. Please come in. I didn't know if I had known you were coming, I would have. I'm not staying long. Aviana turned slowly, still holding a plate, and there he was, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark, simple clothing that somehow looked finer than anything she'd ever seen. His hair was pale, almost white blonde, and his eyes were ice, not cruel, just cold, steady, unreadable. Those eyes moved to her and stopped on the bruise darkening her cheek. Something shifted in his expression, something dangerous. Aviana's heart stopped. This is your daughter. It wasn't a question. Melissa's smile was strained. Yes, Aviana. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze lingering on the marks her mother had left. She's wolfless, Melissa added quickly, as if that explained everything, as if it was an apology she owed him. Bjorn's expression didn't change. I know. Silence. Melissa laughed nervously. Is there something I can help you with, Alpha? Bjorn didn't look away from Aviana. Do you want to stay? Aviana blinked. I'm sorry? Melissa's voice pitched higher. I don't understand. I'm not asking you. His tone was calm. Final. I'm asking her. Aviana's mouth went dry. She looked at her mother, whose face had gone pale, then back at the man in the doorway. Her voice came out small. I don't understand the question. Do you want to stay here? Bjorn said slowly, his eyes never leaving the bruise on her face. Or come with me. Melissa made a choked sound. Alpha, I don't think. She can speak for herself. Aviana's mind was spinning. She didn't know this man, didn't know why he was here, why he was asking, what he wanted, but she looked at her mother, at the woman who had beaten her every day of her life, and she answered, I'll come with you. Melissa's face twisted. Aviana. Good. Bjorn stepped back. Get your things. She doesn't have things worth taking, Melissa said sharply. And I don't know what you think you're... Bjorn's gaze shifted to her, and Melissa stopped mid-sentence. She's coming with me, he said quietly. You can accept that, or I can make you accept it. Choose. Melissa's mouth opened, then closed. She said nothing. Aviana moved on instinct, grabbing the only bag she owned and stuffing in the few clothes she had. Her hands were shaking. Her mother didn't stop her, didn't say goodbye, didn't say anything at all. When Aviana stepped outside, Bjorn was already walking toward a fine carriage drawn by 2 powerful horses. She followed, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. He opened the door for her. She got in, and as the carriage pulled away, Aviana looked back once. Her mother stood in the doorway, face unreadable. Then the house disappeared into the trees. Aviana turned forward, her hands gripping the bag in her lap. She didn't know where she was going, didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't staying. Chapter 2. The ride was silent. Aviana sat pressed against the cushioned seat, her bag clutched tight in her lap, her eyes fixed on the passing trees through the window. Bjorn didn't speak, didn't explain, didn't even look at her. He just sat across from her, his hands resting on his knees, his expression unreadable. Aviana wanted to ask where they were going, wanted to ask why he'd come for her, wanted to ask if she'd just made the worst mistake of her life. But the silence felt too heavy to break, so she sat, and waited, and tried not to panic. The forest gradually changed. The trees grew taller, thicker, their trunks wrapped in moss. The road smoothed out, and soon they were passing through land that looked maintained, organized. Wealth showed itself quietly here, in the fences that ran perfectly straight, in the gates that opened without a sound. In this way, the wolves who patrolled the borders moved with discipline, not aggression. Aviana had never seen anything like it. Her old territory had been rough, functional. People got by. This place didn't just get by, it thrived. The carriage finally slowed as they approached a massive estate built into the side of a hill, part stone, part wood, blending into the landscape like it had grown there. Aviana's breath caught. She'd heard stories about the Northern Territory, about its wealth, its power. But stories didn't prepare you for the reality of it. Bjorn stepped out first, then offered his hand to help her down. Aviana hesitated, then took it. His grip was firm, warm, safe. A woman appeared at the entrance, older, stern-faced, dressed in dark, practical clothing. Priscilla, Bjorn said simply. This is Aviana Scott. She'll be staying. Priscilla's sharp eyes swept over Aviana, taking in the worn dress, the nervous posture, the bruise on her face, the way she held her bag like a shield. Understood. Give her the East Wing room, the one with the lock. Priscilla's brow lifted slightly, but she nodded. Of course. Bjorn turned to Aviana. Priscilla will show you where you'll sleep. If you need anything, ask her. And then he walked away, just like that. No explanation, no reassurance, nothing. Aviana stood frozen, watching him disappear down a corridor. Come, Priscilla said briskly. This way. Aviana followed, her heart still racing. They walked through hallways lined with dark wood and soft lamplight, past rooms with doors she didn't dare look into. up a staircase so smooth and polished it reflected her own uncertain face. Finally, Priscilla stopped in front of a door and pushed it open. "This is yours." Aviana stepped inside and stopped. The room was beautiful. A large bed with thick blankets, a window overlooking the forest, a desk, a chair, space, so much space. "There's a lock," Priscilla said, gesturing to the door. "You control it. No one enters unless you allow it." Aviana stared at the lock. Her voice cracked. "I control it?" Yes. She'd never had a lock before. Never had privacy. Never had a door her mother couldn't open whenever she pleased. "Clothing will be brought to you shortly," Priscilla continued. "Meals are communal, but if you prefer to eat here, that can be arranged." Aviana nodded numbly. Priscilla studied her for a moment, her expression softening just slightly. "You're safe here." Aviana wanted to believe her, but safety was a word she didn't trust anymore. That night, Aviana lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling. She hadn't eaten, hadn't changed, hadn't moved. She just lay there, trying to process what had happened, trying to understand why. A quiet man had taken her from her mother's house. I hadn't explained why, hadn't asked for anything, hadn't touched her. Just brought her here, to this place, this room, this bed. Aviana pulled the blanket tighter around herself. It was soft, softer than anything she'd ever felt, and that terrified her, because in her experience, soft things came with conditions. Comfort was never free, so she lay awake, waiting for the cost. Chapter 3. Morning came with a knock. Aviana jolted upright, heart pounding. "It's Priscilla," came the calm voice. "I have clothing for you." Aviana scrambled to the door and opened it just a crack. Priscilla stood holding neatly folded garments, a soft sweater, dark pants, sturdy boots. These should fit. Aviana took them slowly, her fingers brushing the fabric. It was warm, thick, new. She looked up at Priscilla, confused. "Am I allowed to wear this?" Priscilla's brow furrowed. "It's clothing. It's for wearing, but it's..." Aviana hesitated. "It looks fine. It's appropriate for the weather. But..." "Aviana..." Priscilla's voice softened slightly. "It's yours. Wear it." Aviana nodded slowly and closed the door. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the clothes. Then she carefully set them on the bed and touched the sweater again, just to make sure it was real. An hour later, dressed and warm for the first time in months, Aviana ventured downstairs. The house was quiet. She moved carefully, staying close to the walls, unsure where she was allowed to go. She found the kitchen by accident, a massive space with stone counters and windows that let in soft morning light. Priscilla was there, preparing food. "Sit," she said without looking up. Aviana sat at the far end of the table, hands folded in her lap. Priscilla set a plate in front of her: eggs, bread, fruit. Aviana stared at it. "You don't like eggs?" "No, Aviana swallowed. "It's just a lot. You need to eat." Aviana picked up the fork and took a small bite. It was warm, seasoned, delicious. She ate slowly, carefully, still half expecting someone to take it away. The door opened. Bjorn stepped in, his presence filling the room instantly. Aviana set down her fork and sat straighter. He glanced at her once, then moved to pour himself coffee from the pot on the stove. Silence. Aviana's pulse quickened. He was quiet. Too quiet. She started running through everything she might have done wrong. Did she sit in the wrong chair? Use the wrong fork? Take too much food? Her hands started to shake. "I'm sorry," she blurted. Bjorn paused, cup halfway to his lips. He turned to look at her. "For what?" Aviana's mind went blank. "I don't know. If I did something. You didn't. But you were quiet. And I thought, I was counting." Aviana blinked. "Counting?" Steps from the hallway to the kitchen. He took a sip of coffee. "It's a habit." She stared at him. He wasn't angry. He wasn't upset. He was just counting. "Oh." Bjorn set the cup down and looked at her directly. "Aviana, if you do something wrong, I'll tell you. You don't need to apologize for silence." Her throat tightened. She nodded slowly. Bjorn left without another word. And for the first time, Aviana realized something. Silence didn't always mean danger. Sometimes it just meant peace. Over the next few days, Aviana began to settle into a rhythm. She woke early, ate in the kitchen. explored the parts of the house Priscilla said were fine to wander, and tried very, very hard not to break anything. Bjorn was rarely around. When he was, he didn't speak much. But he was never cruel, never dismissive, just present. One afternoon, Aviana was sitting by the window in her room when Priscilla knocked. "The Alpha would like to see you in his study." Aviana's stomach dropped. Did I do something wrong?" "No. He just wants to speak with you." Aviana followed Priscilla down the hall, her heart pounding. The study door was open. Bjorn sat behind a large desk, papers spread in front of him. He looked up as she entered. "Sit." Aviana sat quickly. Bjorn studied her for a moment, then spoke. "You've been here almost a week." She nodded. "Do you feel safe?" The question startled her. Yes. Good." He leaned back slightly. "Then we can talk." Aviana waited, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I brought you here," Bjorn said slowly, "because I don't believe in wasting potential." "I don't have any potential," Aviana said quietly. "I'm wolfless. That doesn't make you useless." She looked up, surprised. Bjorn's gaze didn't waver. "You've been told your whole life that without a wolf, you're nothing." "That's a lie." Aviana's chest tightened. "You're here because I see value in you. Not because of what you are. Because of who you are." Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I don't understand." "You will." Bjorn stood. "In the meantime, you're allowed to exist here without fear." "Understood?" Aviana nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Bjorn gestured to the door. "Go. Rest." She stood on shaky legs and left the room. And for the first time since she'd arrived, she believed him. Chapter 4. Aviana began to notice things. Small things. The way people moved when Bjorn entered a room, not out of fear, but respect. The way his voice never rose, yet everyone listened. The way he commanded entire meetings with a single glance. She'd been invited to sit in on a council meeting that afternoon. Priscilla had brought her appropriate clothing, a simple dress, dark and elegant, and told her she was welcome to observe. Aviana sat in the back, quiet and still, watching. The council was made up of older wolves' advisors, territory leaders, strategists. They spoke loudly, passionately, debating trade routes and border security. Bjorn sat at the head of the table and said almost nothing. But when he did speak, the room went silent. "We'll proceed with the western route," he said calmly. "Dante will oversee the logistics. Sterling, you'll manage security." One of the councilmen, a broad, graying man named Gray Jacobs, frowned. "Alpha, with respect, the western route is slower." We'd save time and lose men," Bjorn interrupted, his tone even. "The eastern route is faster because it's riskier. I won't trade lives for convenience." Gray hesitated, then nodded. "Understood." Bjorn's eyes swept the table. "Anything else?" No one spoke. "Then we're done." The council stood and filed out, and Aviana realized she'd been holding her breath. Bjorn glanced at her as he gathered his papers. "What did you think?" Aviana startled. I don't know enough to have an opinion. That's not what I asked." She hesitated. "I thought you didn't need to raise your voice to be heard." Bjorn's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "No, I don't." He left the room, and Aviana sat there, heart racing. This man didn't rule through fear. He ruled through certainty. And that was far more dangerous. That evening, Aviana helped Priscilla prepare dinner. It was something to do. Something useful. Priscilla didn't object, just handed her vegetables to chop and instructions to follow. They worked in comfortable silence until Bjorn entered. He paused, watching Aviana at the counter. "You cook?" "A little," Aviana said quickly. "My mother, she taught me enough to be useful." Bjorn nodded slowly. "You did well today." Aviana froze, knife mid-chop. She turned to look at him. "I'm sorry?" "At the meeting." "You observed well. Stayed quiet." "Listen," her heart stuttered. "Is that praise?" Bjorn's brow lifted slightly. "Yes." "Oh," she blinked. "I've never thanked you." He studied her for a moment. Something unreadable in his expression. "You're welcome." And then he left. Aviana stood there, staring at the doorway. Priscilla glanced at her. "That," the older woman said dryly, "was high praise from him." Aviana's hands trembled slightly as she went back to chopping. Praise. Real praise. Not followed by correction. Not laced with disappointment. Just acknowledgement. She felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Hope. Over the following days, Bjorn began spending more time around the house. Not hovering, just present. He'd sit in the library while she read, join her and Priscilla for meals. Ask her quiet questions about what she thought of the territory, the people, the land, and Aviana, slowly, began to answer. One afternoon, they walked the grounds together. Bjorn pointed out the boundaries, explained the patrol routes, and told her about the packs that bordered his land. You know a lot, Aviana said softly. I have to, because you're the alpha, because I'm responsible for them. She looked up at him, surprised by the weight in his voice. You care about them. Of course I do. Even the ones who aren't wolves. Bjorn stopped walking. He turned to face her fully. Aviana, being wolfless doesn't make you less. It makes you different. And different isn't weak. Her throat tightened. My mother didn't think so. Your mother was wrong. The certainty in his voice broke something in her. She looked away quickly, blinking hard. Thank you, she whispered. Bjorn didn't respond, but he didn't walk away either. He just stood there, steady, solid, safe. And Aviana realized, with a jolt that felt almost like fear, she was starting to trust him. Chapter 5. Aviana started noticing him differently. The way his shoulders filled doorways, the way his voice, low and calm, settled something restless in her chest. The way he looked at her sometimes not with pity, not with judgment, but with something she couldn't name. It scared her. Because wanting something always led to disappointment. One evening, she found him in the library, reading by the fire. She hesitated in the doorway. You can come in, he said without looking up. She stepped inside, settling into the chair across from him. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling softly. Can I ask you something? Aviana said finally. Yes. Why did you take me from my mother? Bjorn closed his book slowly, his pale eyes meeting hers. Because you deserved better. You didn't know me. I didn't need to. She frowned. I don't understand. You were being treated like a mistake, Bjorn said quietly. I don't allow that in my territory. And I wasn't going to allow it in yours either. Aviana's chest ached. You could have just sent someone to check on me. You didn't have to bring me here. I could have. His gaze didn't waver. But I wanted to. The air between them shifted. Aviana felt her pulse quicken. Why? Bjorn leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. Because the moment I saw you, I knew you were strong. You just didn't know it yet. Her breath caught. I'm not strong. You survived 17 years in a place that told you daily you didn't matter. You're still here, still trying, still standing. His voice dropped. That's strength, Aviana. Tears blurred her vision. She looked away quickly, wiping at her eyes. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for feeling. She laughed shakily. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Be here. Be safe. Be anything other than what I was. Bjorn stood and crossed to her chair. He crouched in front of her, his eyes level with hers. Then learn, he said softly. You have time. Aviana's hand moved without thinking, reaching out, fingertips brushing his. He didn't pull away, didn't flinch. He just watched her, his expression calm but his eyes intent. Bjorn, she whispered. Yes. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, so light she almost didn't feel it. Feel whatever you want, he said quietly. There's no rule here. Her heart hammered. She wanted to lean closer. I wanted to close the space between them, but fear held her still. Bjorn seemed to sense it. He stood slowly, releasing her hand. Rest, he said. We'll talk tomorrow. And then he left. Aviana sat there, her hand still tingling where he'd touched her. She pressed it to her chest and felt her heart race beneath her palm. The next few days were careful, full of near touches and held gazes, moments where they stood too close and neither moved away. Aviana started seeking him out. Not consciously, but she'd find herself in rooms he was in, sitting at tables where he sat, walking paths he walked, and Bjorn noticed. She could tell by the way his eyes followed her, by the way he'd pause when she entered the room, by the way his voice softened when he spoke to her. One afternoon, Aviana was reaching for a book on a high shelf in the library when she felt him behind her. His hand came up, easily retrieving the volume she'd been straining for. But he didn't step back. He stood there, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Close enough that when she turned, they were nearly chest to chest. Aviana's breath caught. Bjorn's eyes were darker than usual, his jaw tight. Aviana, he said quietly. Yes? Tell me to move. She swallowed hard. What if I don't want you to? His pupils dilated. Then we have a problem. Why? Because I'm trying very hard to be patient with you. His voice had gone rough. And you're making it difficult. Aviana's heart pounded. I don't want you to be patient. Bjorn's hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her jaw, tilting her face up. You don't know what you're asking for. Then show me. Something broke in his restraint. He kissed her, not gently, not tentatively, but with the kind of hunger he'd been holding back since the moment he'd first seen her. Aviana gasped against his mouth, and Bjorn took advantage, deepening the kiss until she was dizzy with it. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. Bjorn made a low sound in his throat, his arm wrapping around her waist, lifting her slightly so she was pressed fully against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Aviana's lips were swollen and her eyes were wide. That, she whispered, was a mistake. Bjorn finished, his voice strained. Her face fell. Oh. No, he cursed softly. Not like that. I meant I shouldn't have. You're not ready. I am ready. Aviana, I'm ready. She repeated, stronger this time. I want this. I want you. Bjorn's eyes closed briefly, his control visibly fraying. You need to be sure. I am sure. If we do this. His eyes opened, burning into hers. There's no going back. You understand that? Aviana nodded. Say it. I understand. Bjorn studied her face for a long moment. Then he bent and lifted her into his arms. Aviana let out a startled sound, her arms wrapping around his neck. What are you doing? Taking you somewhere more appropriate than a library. He carried her through the halls, his stride purposeful, until they reached his room. He set her down carefully, then stepped back. Last chance, he said quietly. If you want to leave, leave now. Aviana reached for the hem of her sweater and pulled it over her head. Bjorn's breath hissed out. Aviana, I'm not leaving. His restraint shattered. He crossed to her in 2 strides, his mouth finding hers again as his hands mapped her body with reverent intensity. Aviana trembled beneath his touch, overwhelmed and wanting more all at once. Bjorn lifted her again, this time laying her on his bed with a gentleness that made her chest ache. He stood over her, his eyes drinking her in. You're beautiful, he said hoarsely. Aviana's cheeks flushed. I'm not. You are. He leaned down, pressing a kiss to her collarbone. And I'm going to make sure you know it. What followed was slow, thorough. Bjorn took his time learning every inch of her, his hands and mouth worshipping her until Aviana was shaking with need. Bjorn, she gasped. Please. Not yet. I can't. Yes, you can. His voice was rough but sure. I want you ready. And he made sure she was. By the time he finally settled between her thighs, Aviana was desperate for him. Look at me, Bjorn commanded softly. She did, their eyes locked as he entered her slowly, carefully, giving her body time to adjust. Aviana's breath caught at the stretch, the fullness, the overwhelming sensation of finally being connected to him. Bjorn's jaw was tight, his control hanging by a thread. All right? He gritted out. Yes, she breathed. More. He moved then, setting a rhythm that built steadily, his hips rolling in deep, measured thrusts that had Aviana arching beneath him. You feel perfect, Bjorn murmured against her throat. Like you were made for me. Aviana's nails dug into his shoulders as pleasure coiled tighter and tighter in her core. Bjorn, I know. Let go. And she did. She shattered beneath him, crying out his name as her body pulsed with release. Bjorn followed moments later, his own control breaking as he buried himself deep and groaned her name like a prayer. Afterward, they lay tangled together, both still breathing hard. Bjorn's hand stroked up and down her spine in soothing motions. You all right? He asked quietly. Aviana nodded against his chest. Better than all right. She felt his smile against her hair. Good. They lay in comfortable silence for a long moment. Then Aviana whispered, Bjorn? I'm glad I came with you. His arms tightened around her. So am I. The days that followed were filled with a new kind of intimacy. Not just physical, though there was plenty of that, but emotional. Bjorn began opening up to her in ways he didn't with anyone else. He told her about the weight of leadership, about the loneliness of being at the top, about the fear that one day he'd make the wrong call and people would suffer for it. Aviana listened, and slowly, she began sharing too, about the years of silence, about the mornings her mother beat her, about the belief that she was fundamentally broken, and Bjorn listened, really listened, without judgment, without trying to fix her, just listening. One afternoon, they were in the library together when Aviana looked up from her book and said suddenly, "I used to think I was invisible." Bjorn's eyes lifted from his own reading. "You're not. I know that now." She smiled faintly. "But for years, I moved through the world like a ghost. Like if I was quiet enough, maybe people would forget I existed and stop being disappointed." Bjorn set his book aside completely. "And now I think maybe I was just waiting for someone to see me." His expression softened. "I see you, Aviana. I know." Her voice was thick with emotion. "And it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because what if I'm not enough? What if you look closer and realize I'm exactly what my mother always said I was?" Bjorn stood and crossed to her chair. He pulled her to her feet, his hands gentle on her arms. "Your mother was a bitter woman who took out her disappointment on a child who deserved better. Nothing she said about you was true." "But nothing," he repeated firmly. "You are strong, you are valuable, and you are more than enough." Aviana's lip trembled. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know you." His thumbs brushed her cheeks. "I've watched you rebuild yourself. I've seen your kindness, your resilience, your courage. I've seen who you are when you're not being told who to be." A tear slipped down her face. "And I'm not going anywhere," Bjorn continued. "No matter how scared you get, no matter how many times you doubt yourself, I'm staying." Aviana broke. She threw her arms around his neck and held on tight. Bjorn wrapped her in his embrace, one hand cradling the back of her head. "I've got you," he murmured. "Always." One night, she found him on the terrace, staring out at the forest. She stepped beside him, close enough to feel his warmth. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Thinking about?" He glanced at her. "You..." Her breath hitched. "What about me? How you're adjusting? If you're happy." "I am," she said softly. "Happier than I've ever been." Bjorn's jaw tightened slightly. "Good." They stood in silence. And then, slowly, Aviana leaned her head against his shoulder. Bjorn went still, but he didn't move away, didn't tell her to stop. He just stood there, steady, and let her rest. After a moment, his arm came around her shoulders, pulling her closer against his side. Aviana smiled against his shirt. "You're warm. You're cold." "I'm always cold." Bjorn's hand rubbed up and down her arm. "Then I'll keep you warm." Aviana looked up at him. The moonlight caught his features, softening the hard lines, making him look almost vulnerable. "Bjorn," she said softly. "Yes? I think I'm falling in love with you." He went very still. Then his hand came up, cupping her face. "Good," he said quietly. "Because I've already fallen for you." Aviana's eyes filled with tears. "Really? Really?" She reached up, pulling his face down to hers, and kissed him. Slow and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Bjorn rested his forehead against hers. "Come inside," he murmured. "It's too cold out here." Hand in hand, they walked back into the warmth of the house, back to his room, back to his bed. And this time, when they came together, it was different, softer, deeper, not just passion, but connection. Bjorn moved inside her with slow, deliberate strokes, his eyes never leaving hers. "I love you," he said against her lips. Aviana's breath caught. "I love you too." And as they moved together, finding their rhythm, finding their release, Aviana felt something settle in her chest. Home. This was home. Not the house, not the territory, but him. Bjorn was home. Chapter 6. The council meeting that changed everything happened 2 weeks later. It was supposed to be routine. Territory updates, trade agreements, security reports. Aviana sat in her usual spot in the back, quietly observing. The discussion had turned to border disputes with a neighboring pack, a pack led by a man named Houston Archer, who had a reputation for being volatile. Gray Jacobs was advocating for a show of force. "We can't let Archer think we're weak," Gray argued. "If we don't push back now, he'll keep testing our boundaries." Sterling Dennis nodded. "Agreed. We should increase patrols, make our presence known." Bjorn listened without comment, his expression neutral. Then he spoke. "Or we could talk to him." The room went quiet. Gray frowned. "Talk? Yes, talk." Bjorn's tone was calm. "Archer's aggressive because he feels threatened. His territory is resource poor. He's pushing into ours because his people are struggling. That's not our problem, Gray said. It becomes our problem when it leads to conflict we could have avoided. Bjorn leaned back in his chair. We have surplus grain. Archer needs food. We negotiate a trade agreement. His people eat. He stops crossing our borders. Sterling looked skeptical. And if he refuses, then we respond with force. But we should try diplomacy first. Gray opened his mouth to argue, then caught the look in Bjorn's eyes and thought better of it. As you say, Alpha. Bjorn's gaze swept the table. Anything else? Dante Sloan cleared his throat. There's the matter of the Southern timber contracts. And then Houston Archer himself walked into the room. Everyone froze. Archer was a big man, broad and scarred, with wild dark hair and eyes that looked for a fight. Heard you were talking about me, he said, his voice carrying across the space. Thought I'd save you the trouble of sending a messenger. The tension in the room spiked. Bjorn didn't move, didn't react. He just looked at Archer calmly. Houston, unexpected. I'll bet. Archer's eyes swept the council, then landed on Bjorn. Word is you think I'm desperate. Word is you need resources, Bjorn corrected. There's no shame in that. Archer's jaw tightened. I don't need your charity. Good, because I'm not offering charity. I'm offering trade. That caught Archer off guard. Trade? Grain for timber. Your territory has excellent forests. Mine has surplus crops. We both benefit. Archer studied him suspiciously. Why would you help me? Because fighting you costs lives and resources. Trading with you costs neither. Bjorn's expression didn't change. And because strong neighbors make better allies than desperate enemies. The room held its breath. Archer stared at Bjorn for a long moment. Then, slowly, a grin spread across his face. You're either the smartest alpha I've met or the most naive. Time will tell. Archer laughed, a big booming sound that seemed to release all the tension at once. All right, Hammond. You've got a deal. He extended his hand. Bjorn stood and shook it firmly. The council relaxed visibly. As Archer turned to leave, he paused and looked back. One more thing. Yes? Archer's eyes found Aviana in the back of the room. That your mate? Every pair of eyes turned to her. Aviana's heart stopped. Bjorn's expression didn't flicker. Yes, Archer grunted. Brave woman, taking on an alpha king. And then he left. The room erupted in barely contained whispers. Aviana sat frozen, her face burning. Bjorn met her eyes across the space and smiled slightly. When the meeting adjourned, Aviana waited until everyone had filed out before approaching him. You told him I was your mate. Yes. You never asked. Aviana. Bjorn turned to face her fully. Do you want to be my mate? Her breath caught. Yes. But, then you are. Is it that simple? It's exactly that simple. She stared at him. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Aviana felt tears prick her eyes. You really want me? Bjorn crossed to her, his hands cupping her face. I really want you. Not because you have a wolf. Not because you're powerful or connected or anything other than who you are. His voice dropped. I want you because you're you, and that's always been enough. Aviana kissed him, hard and desperate and grateful. When they broke apart, she was crying and laughing at the same time. I love you, she said. I love you too. That evening, there was a small celebration. Nothing formal, just Bjorn's inner circle gathering for dinner. Aviana sat beside Bjorn, his hand resting possessively on her thigh beneath the table. The conversation flowed easily. Stories and jokes traded back and forth. At one point, Dante was telling a story about a diplomatic mission gone wrong, and Gray interrupted with a dry comment that had everyone chuckling, including Bjorn. It was the first time Aviana had heard him really laugh. The sound was rough, like it didn't get used often, but genuine. And then Gray said something else, completely deadpan, and Aviana laughed, really laughed. The sound startled her so much, she clapped a hand over her mouth, eyes wide. The table fell quiet. Bjorn's gaze snapped to her. Aviana's face burned. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean, do that again. She blinked. What? Laugh again. Her heart raced. I can't just try. She let out a shaky breath and smiled, and then, quietly, laughed again. Bjorn's expression softened in a way she'd never seen. Better, he said quietly. The table resumed their conversation, but Bjorn's hand squeezed her thigh gently. She looked at him. He leaned close, his lips brushing her ear. I love that sound. Aviana's breath hitched. It felt strange. Good strange? The best kind of strange. He kissed her temple. Then I'll make sure you do it more often. That night, after everyone had gone, Bjorn found her in the library. She was curled up in a chair, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Can I sit? She nodded. He settled into the chair across from her. You laughed today. I know. I'm sorry if... Don't apologize. His voice was firm. I liked it. Aviana looked up, surprised. You did? Yes. She pulled the blanket tighter. I haven't laughed like that in... I don't know how long. Then I'll make sure you do it more often. Her chest ached. Why are you so kind to me? Bjorn leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Because you deserve kindness. I'm nobody. You're not. His eyes held hers. And I need you to stop believing that. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. Bjorn stood, crossed to her chair, and crouched in front of her. Aviana? She looked at him through blurred vision. You are not a mistake, he said quietly. You are not less. You are exactly who you're supposed to be. She broke, sobbed, and Bjorn pulled her forward, wrapping his arms around her. She cried into his shoulder, her hands fisting in his shirt, and he held her, didn't tell her to stop, didn't pull away, just held her until the tears slowed. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy, and her eyes were red. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. She laughed wetly. I don't know how to stop. Bjorn's thumb brushed a tear from her cheek. Then I'll remind you, he said softly. Until you remember. Aviana's breath shook, and then, without thinking, she kissed him. It was brief, soft, tentative, but real. When she pulled back, her eyes were wide. I am sorry. I shouldn't have. Bjorn's hand cupped her face, and he kissed her back. Slowly, deeply, like she was something precious. When they finally broke apart, Aviana was trembling. Bjorn rested his forehead against hers. Don't apologize for that either, he murmured. She laughed shakily. Okay, and for the first time she didn't. He stood, pulling her to her feet, and led her from the library. Back to his room, back to his bed, and this time, their lovemaking was different. It was tender. Unhurried, full of whispered words and gentle touches. Bjorn worshipped every inch of her, his hands and mouth mapping her body like he was memorizing sacred text. When he finally entered her, Aviana wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him deeper, wanting to feel every part of him. They moved together in perfect sync, their bodies speaking a language neither needed words for. And when release came, it crashed over them both like a wave, gentle but overwhelming, leaving them breathless and clinging to each other. Afterward, Bjorn pulled her close, her back to his chest, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. I love you, he murmured against her hair. I love you too, she whispered back. And for the first time in her life, Aviana fell asleep feeling completely, utterly safe. Let's pause for just a moment. That laugh, that moment when Aviana forgot to be afraid, that's what this story is really about. If this part touched you, please leave a comment, even a single word. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Cold Blood Empire. Alright, let's finish this journey. Chapter 7. Aviana woke the next morning with her heart still racing. She'd kissed Bjorn Hammond, the Alpha King of the Northern Territory, and he'd kissed her back. She dressed quickly, her hands shaking slightly, and ventured downstairs. Priscilla was in the kitchen, as always. Morning, the older woman said. Sleep well? Aviana's face heated. Yes. Priscilla gave her a knowing look but said nothing. Aviana was pouring herself tea when Dante Sloan, one of Bjorn's top advisors, entered. He nodded at her politely. Miss Scott. Just Aviana is fine, he smiled faintly. The Alpha speak to you yet today? No. Why? Dante hesitated. There's a formal gathering tonight. Territory leaders, dignitaries. Bjorn will be expected to attend. Aviana's stomach sank. Oh, he'll likely want you there. Me? She shook her head. I'm nobody. I don't belong to something like that. Dante's expression softened. You're under the Alpha King's protection. That makes you someone. Aviana's mind spun. Alpha King. She'd known Bjorn was important. But the weight of it, the reality hadn't fully settled until now. He's really the king? Dante looked at her, surprised. You didn't know? She shook her head slowly. He owns this entire territory. Controls trade routes across 3 regions. Commands the largest pack network on the continent. Dante paused, You're living in the home of the most powerful alpha in the north. Aviana set down her cup, her hands shaking. I didn't know. Bjorn doesn't advertise it, Dante said quietly. But everyone else knows. Aviana's chest tightened. Of course they did. And now she'd kissed him. Now she'd let herself feel things. Now she'd started to believe. She stood abruptly. Excuse me. She left the kitchen and walked quickly to her room, her heart pounding. She locked the door and sat on the edge of the bed. Why would someone like him want someone like her? She was wolfless, broken, nobody. And he was everything. A knock sounded. Aviana, Bjorn's voice. She didn't answer. I know you're in there. Open the door. She stood slowly and unlocked it. Bjorn stepped inside, his eyes scanning her face. Dante told you. She nodded. And now you're spiraling. I didn't know, she said quietly. I didn't know who you really were. I'm the same person I was yesterday. No, you're not. Her voice cracked. You're a king. And you're mine. The words hung in the air. Aviana's breath caught. I brought you here because I wanted you here, Bjorn said firmly. Not because I pitied you. Not because I needed a project. Because I saw you and knew. Knew what? That you were worth keeping. Tears burned her eyes. I don't understand why. Bjorn stepped closer, his hands gentle as they cupped her face. Then let me show you, and he kissed her. Slow, sure, like he had all the time in the world. When he pulled back, Aviana was trembling. There's a gathering tonight, he said quietly. I want you there, with me. Everyone will know I'm nobody. Everyone will know you're mine. His eyes held hers. And that's all that matters. Aviana swallowed hard. Okay. Bjorn's thumb brushed her cheek. Good. That evening, Priscilla helped Aviana dress. The gown was deep blue, simple but elegant, fitted perfectly. Aviana stared at herself in the mirror. She looked different. You look beautiful, Priscilla said. Aviana's throat tightened. I don't feel beautiful. You will. When Aviana descended the stairs, Bjorn was waiting. He looked up and went completely still. His eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. Aviana. She stopped on the last step, suddenly self-conscious. Is it too much? No. His voice was rough. It's perfect. He offered her his arm. She took it, her heart racing, and together, they walked into the gathering. The room fell silent the moment they entered. Every eye turned to them. To him, to her. Aviana wanted to disappear, but Bjorn's hand covered hers, steady and sure. Stay with me, he murmured. She nodded, and didn't let go. Chapter 8. The gathering was overwhelming. Territory leaders introduced themselves with practiced smiles. Dignitaries spoke in careful, political tones. Everyone watched her, judged her. I wondered why she was there, but Bjorn never left her side. When someone asked who she was, he answered simply, She's with me. When someone implied she didn't belong, his eyes went cold, and they backed down immediately. Aviana had never felt so protected, but also she'd never felt so out of place. By the time the evening ended, she was exhausted. Bjorn walked her back to her room in silence. When they reached her door, she turned to him. Thank you. For what? For not leaving me alone in there. Bjorn's expression softened. I would never. She hesitated. Why are you so patient with me? He stepped closer. Because you're not difficult, Aviana. You were just hurt. Her eyes filled with tears. She laughed shakily. That's not funny. I know. His voice was soft. That's why it matters. Aviana broke. She stepped forward and kissed him deeply, desperately, like she was trying to prove something. Bjorn responded immediately, his hands sliding into her hair, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Aviana whispered, I don't know how to do this. Do what? Be wanted. Bjorn's hands framed her face. Then I'll teach you, he said quietly. Every day, until you believe it. Aviana's hands fisted in his shirt. I'm scared. I know. What if I'm not enough? You already are. She kissed him again. And this time she didn't pull away. They moved into her room, the door closing softly behind them. Bjorn's hands were careful, reverent, as he touched her. Aviana trembled beneath his hands, but not from fear, from want, from need, from the overwhelming realization that she was allowed to have this. Aviana, Bjorn murmured against her skin. Tell me if you want me to stop. Don't stop. His eyes darkened. Are you sure? Yes. And for the first time in her life, Aviana chose something for herself. She chose him. She chose this. She chose to be wanted. And Bjorn made sure she felt it. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered word. He worshipped her like she was something sacred. And Aviana finally believed she was. The next morning, she woke up wrapped in his arms. Bjorn was already awake, watching her. "Morning," she whispered. "Morning," she smiled. "You're staring." "I'm memorizing," her heart stuttered. "Why?" "Because I want to remember this," he said quietly. "The moment you stopped looking at me like I might leave." Tears pricked her eyes. "I don't want you to leave." "I won't." She believed him. For the first time, she believed him. Chapter 9. Weeks passed. Aviana settled fully into life in the Northern Territory. She wasn't just Bjorn's, she was her own. She helped Priscilla in the kitchens, attended council meetings. I walked the territory with confidence. And when people asked who she was, she no longer hesitated. "I'm Aviana Scott." No apology, no shame, just the truth. One afternoon, a familiar face appeared at the gates. Melissa Scott. Aviana stood on the terrace, watching her mother be escorted up the path. Bjorn appeared beside her. "Do you want me to send her away?" Aviana considered, then shook her head. "No, I'll see her." Bjorn's hand brushed hers. "I'll be close." Aviana walked down to meet her mother in the entryway. Melissa looked older, tired. "Aviana, Mother." Melissa's eyes swept over her, taking in the fine clothes, the confident posture, the calm expression. "You look well." "I am well." Silence. "I came to see if you were all right," Melissa said stiffly. Aviana almost laughed. "You came to see if you made a mistake letting me go." Melissa's face tightened. "I didn't." "You did." Aviana's voice was steady. "You treated me like I was broken my whole life." "But I wasn't broken, Mother. I was just different." Melissa looked away. "I did the best I could." "No," Aviana said quietly. "You did what was easiest. There's a difference." Melissa's jaw clenched. "I see he's filled your head with confidence." "He didn't fill it with anything," Aviana said firmly. "He just gave me space to find it myself." Melissa's eyes flicked past her to where Bjorn stood in the doorway, silent and watchful. "You'll regret this," Melissa said coldly. "When he tires of you, he won't. You don't know that." "I do." Aviana stepped closer. "Because he chose me. Not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to." Melissa's face twisted. "And you believe that?" "Yes, because she did." Melissa turned and walked toward the gates without another word. Aviana watched her go, and felt nothing. No guilt, no regret, no longing. Just peace. Bjorn stepped beside her. "You all right?" "Yes." He took her hand. "Good." They stood together, watching the gates close. And Aviana smiled, because she finally understood. She didn't need a wolf to be whole. She didn't need her mother's approval to matter. She didn't need to be anything other than who she was, and that was enough. Months later, Aviana stood on the terrace beside Bjorn, watching the northern lights shimmer across the sky. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Regret what?" "Taking me." Bjorn turned to her, his pale eyes steady. "Never," she smiled. "Not even a little?" "Not even a little." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. Aviana leaned into him, her heart full. "I love you," she whispered. Bjorn's arms tightened. "I love you too." And in that moment, Aviana Scott, the girl who was told she was unfinished, finally felt complete. Not because she gained a wolf, not because she became something she wasn't, but because she was seen, chosen, loved, exactly as she was, and that was everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. If Aviana's journey moved you, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to Cold Blood Empire. You're helping build something powerful here, one story at a time. Until next time, stay fierce, stay loyal, and never let them tell you who you're allowed to become.